In Washington Monday, President Obama said U.S. troops in Iraq are leaving with honor and their heads held high. The president and Iraqi Prime Minister Maliki placed a wreath at Arlington National Cemetery's Tomb of the Unknowns.
Monday's ceremony marked a new phase in U.S.-Iraqi relations at the end of a war that has cost more than $800 billion and nearly 4,500 American lives. Joining us now to talk about Iraq and other issues is former Vice President Dick Cheney, author of the recent bestseller and memoir, My Time, a personal and political memoir. Mr. Cheney, good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to start by talking about Iraq and Nouri al-Maliki. As you know, he's in town here, or was in town. Reports this morning that he's rounding up some Ba'athist members, that he's kicking Western companies out of the green zone, trying to consolidate power. Is this to be expected?
Well, I don't know the details now the way I used to when I was in the loop and intelligence reports and so forth. I think the Iraqis have got to organize themselves however they want to organize themselves. They're a sovereign state, and that's partly what the struggle was all about. But I think they've made major progress. They've written a constitution. They've had a lot of elections. They've got a democracy established. It's not perfect by any means. There's a lot of work to be done. But they've clearly much better off than when Saddam Hussein was in charge.
But do you see them taking a step back before they potentially take a step forward?
Yeah, I'm concerned. The thing that bothers me most is when we negotiated the Status of Forces Agreement at the end of the Bush administration, part of that was that the bulk of the forces would leave at the end of this year, but part of it was there was going to be a separate track, a separate negotiation for a stay-behind force, a force of 15 or 20,000 troops that would be there to provide security. There's still 16,000 Americans in Iraq.
Right.
And that they would be there for training purposes and so forth. Those negotiations began in August, but they were broken off in October. The deal was never done.
Given they're not present, how concerned are you then about Iran's influence over the region?
Well, I'm concerned about Iran not only because of what they've attempted for years to try to do in Iraq, but also because they're aggressively pursuing nuclear weapons. And at the same time, it looks like the United States is coming out of Iraq, like we're significantly reducing our presence in Afghanistan. It looks like the Iranians are significantly expanding their influence at the expense of the U.S.
How close do you think Iran is to a nuclear weapon?
Very close.
Romney said if this president continues, that they will get one. Do you agree with him?
I don't see anything that's been done by this administration that's going to stop that program.
You've been critical of the administration for the response to the downed drone, the fact that there wasn't an airstrike in Iran to basically abolish this thing and get it out of their hands. Would not, though, an airstrike on Iran have potentially led us into a war with them?
Well, if you look at what Iran's done over the years, they've been the prime backers of Hezbollah, of Hamas. The bombing of the Marine barracks in Beirut in 1983 cost us 241 American lives. These were Iranian-supported ventures. It's not as though they haven't already committed acts that some people would say are come close to being acts of war. For us to go in and take out the drone that crashed would have been, I think, a fairly simple operation, and it would have denied them the value of the intelligence they can collect by having that aircraft. But the administration basically limited itself to saying, please give it back, and yesterday the Iranians said no.
What happens to this drone now? So the Iranians give it to China, they reverse engineer it. I mean, the Iranians could potentially give it back to us after they do whatever they need to do with it.
They could, but presumably they'll study it, they'll try to reverse engineer it. It's the way the technology spreads. Somebody else may be able to take this and try to build an equivalent system that they can then use against us. It's got stealth capability built into it. It's a significant loss of intelligence.
With the economy being so front and center, do you think the GOP is taking the Iranian threat seriously enough in this election?
I haven't seen them do anything yet that is going to inhibit the Iranian program. They continue to be actively and aggressively pursuing nuclear weapons. That's a terrible proposition, I believe, to have a terror-sponsoring state like Iran, one of the world's worst regimes, in effect spending enormous amounts to build the capacity to have a nuclear weapon. I think that their efforts to try to dominate that part of the world, the Persian Gulf and all those areas around it, we've got a lot of great friends over there. People have been good allies of ours over the years who are scared to death that the Iranians are going to end up with nukes.